Hey, 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 it's Fred Albert, and I'm gonna sing a song for you, and Bill's gonna show you a thing or two. You'll have some fun now with me and all the gang, learning from each other while we do our thing. Gonna have a good time.
It's Bill Cosby coming at you with music and fun, and if you're not careful, you may learn something before it's done. So let's get ready, okay? Hey, hey, hey.
It's been a crazy week this week. Early this week, Bill Cosby was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in a state facility for the drugging and rape of a woman back in 2004. Something of which he's been accused of by multiple women for decades, since the 60s at least. It looks like he finally got caught, busted, tried, and will serve his time. Not to make light of his crimes, I'm glad that Kavanaugh and Dr. Ford took center stage this week with their nonsense for the Supreme Court nomination, because it allowed the press to not focus too heavily on Bill Cosby's sentencing, which is a good thing, I think, because while he certainly got his comeuppance for doing horrible, despicable acts, I think that the media, for what coverage it did give, takes a certain sort of glee in destroying a man who for 40 years has been part of the American fabric. I want to take this time to go ahead and showcase the importance of Bill Cosby's work. Not Bill Cosby the man, not Bill Cosby the criminal rapist, but Bill Cosby the man who worked his entire life to lift up a minority and to integrate them into a new society of fairness and equality, whose focus on education, especially early childhood education, had enormously positive impact on society as a whole in America. I think it's something that hopefully will stand historically as more important than the end of his life and career being sentenced for horrible, despicable acts.
Fine. Well, let up on me, will you? I'm only human.
It started back in the 60s, shortly after the civil rights legislation, when he started working with Robert Culp on a TV series called I Spy, which showed him working alongside Robert Culp in an racially integrated team of spies. And if you've ever get a chance to watch the show, I recommend that you do, because it's campy and serious at the same time, yet also delivers a thrilling spy experience for Cold War era, racially divisive 1960s. It's a good show. I've got a segment here from Robert Culp explaining, his work with Bill Cosby and the importance it had at the time. I'll play that here in a minute.
Describe your chemistry with Bill Cosby.
Well, Cos and I went all the way through the same way. We never changed. He trusted me totally with regard to story. And all that that entails and all that that embodies, whether it's my writing or somebody else's writing. And I trusted him utterly, obviously, about the comedy. And the only place that we ever stuck assiduously to the script was when I wrote it. He never changed a syllable that I wrote, because he assumed, and he correctly, that I had eliminated all the missteps, and that I wanted it to be written, spoken that way, that those were the words that would tell the story in the shortest possible span. So that was the basis of our professional working relationship. On top of everything else, we how shall I put this? We liked each other enormously. We tried to socialize at the beginning. We tried to take our wives out to the ballet, to dinner, and so forth. By the time we were doing that, and had the evenings to do it, which were rare, when we weren't totally exhausted, we had come to a language of shorthand, a shorthand language, which was based on, like hundreds of punchlines of little personal, meaningless little jokes, which weren't funny to anybody but us. Our wives, both of them, were so offended when we would instinctively lapse into this jargon and leave them out. They were so offended that we had to give up socializing, because we would both go home and get hell from our wives for leaving them in the ladies' room or something, There's been an awful lot with regard to that chemistry, which was unique and never to be replicated. And that came to him because he was that fast. He's the brightest man I ever knew, and God knows he has the fastest mind that I'd ever run across in anybody. When it came to race relations, when it came to the fact that there were stations in the South that wouldn't carry us, I said, you want to do anything about that? He said, our statement is a non-statement. That's what it is. And that's where it lies, and that's what's going to make it funny. That's what make it possible for us to be funny and have fun and get laughs and go free. We can't do it any other way. That's the way it should be. That's the way it is, and let them make of that whatever they see fit. It'll work. It just takes a little bit of patience. That's out of Mr. Cosby's mouth. And I said, dead on, partner.
From there, he was a well-known comedian, working the Catskills and the club circuits at the time, just recognized as a true talent. He went on there, and then in the 70s, focused down on child education, created not only the Fat Albert intro that you saw in the early 70s, but also in the late 70s focused on even earlier education with a segment that was originally developed for Captain Kangaroo and then picked up by Nickelodeon, Picture Pages, which I was exposed to as a youth, mostly because I was spoiled by having family in the Pittsburgh area where both Mr. Rogers and Picture Pages originated from, so I got exposed to it early and often as a result. But the Picture Pages on Captain Kangaroo were a staple of my childhood. I know for some it was on Nickelodeon. You might not even know who Captain Kangaroo was, but you certainly know Bill Cosby, and you've probably watched a picture page or two.
Picture pages, lots of fun with picture pages, lots of fun with crayons and with pencils. You can play with picture pages, fill your day with picture pages, till Bill Cosby does another picture page with you.
To order your picture pages, send $1 for your monthly issue to cover the cost of publishing, postage, and handling to Picture Pages.
And this is all before getting his gig on NBC on The Cosby Show. And The Cosby Show is definitely significantly and culturally important because it showed an African-American family in an upper-middle-class setting, probably even a lower upper-class setting, being that both parents were educated doctors, practicing doctors, raising their kids in an urban setting, but not so far removed from the suburban setting that most people experienced in the 80s. It made him very relatable, and he was known as America's dad for a reason, because he gave sage advice, one of the last ones on national TV, to be a intelligent and an admirable father figure. Coinciding with the tail end of the Cosby Show was the Married with Children age, which, not to besmirch Married with Children, it's a funny show, but it's just an old radio bit called The Bickersons, re-envisioned for the television age. But it doesn't put the male household lead in a positive light, and subsequently, not much has since. I mean, you might count Seventh Heaven, but much like the Cosby Show, that guy got himself in trouble for his own sexual deviations in the real world, which is a damn shame. It is absolutely a damn shame. But Bill, beyond the Cosby Show and some of his subsequent work, really did have a lot of positive work, is now undermined and overshadowed, hopefully only briefly, by his own actions in being a horrible sexual predator. I don't want to make light of him being a sexual predator, but I think his work outside of that has a place and needs to be recognized for what it is, especially in the 90s. We went from the late 60s, where we were horribly racially divided as a country, into the 70s as we were trying to work it out. And that's where shows like Fat Albert, that I grew up on, made it normal to be exposed to people of different colors. I mean, along that, you could say Sanford and Son and Chico and the Man and What's Happening, and that's all true to a certain extent. It was really beyond the Fat Albert age, getting to the Cosby Show and everything I had already previously discussed about it. Into the 90s, as the culture had moved on, it became more important to, instead of speaking to a narrative of inclusion and normalcy, for, as weird as that sounds, for the African-American family and experience in the American zeitgeist, Dr. Cosby took an early tact going back to the African-American community and explaining to them again directly that they had lost their focus and needed to focus down on education within themselves and a father figure in their own homes, as, you know, the black nuclear family had been destroyed in the late 60s and early 70s. And I'm not going to get into why that is, but I think we can all agree that that absolutely did happen during that time period. And by the early 90s, Cosby recognized that the damage that had been done already for almost an entire generation of youth, of African-American youth. And he started talking directly to those groups and giving them a message that they did not want to hear. He was very concerned that the lack of education and lack of father figures and lack of accountability for the young men in the African-American community was the result and cause of continuing damage to the African-American experience in America. He was very vocal about it. He wrote several books about it. He did many interviews about it. He gave a famous speech that I will play called the Pound Cake Speech. That, unfortunately, I can't find good audio for, but I'll play it in its entirety because it's important work, and it should go down in history and should be studied in history despite Dr. Cosby's current and permanent conviction for horrendous acts against women.
In the old days, you couldn't hooky school because behind every drawn shade was an eye. And before your mother got off the bus into the house, she knew exactly where you had gone, who had gone into the house. Parents don't know that today. I'm talking about these people who cry when their son is standing there in an orange suit. Where were you when he was 2? Where were you when he was 12? Where were you when he was 18? And how come you don't know he had a pistol? These are not political criminals. These are people going around stealing Coca-Cola. People getting shot in the back of the head over a piece of pound cake. And then we all run out and we're outraged. Oh, the cops shouldn't have shot him. What the hell was he doing with the pound cake in his hand? Brown versus the Board of Education is no longer the white person's problem. We've got to take the neighborhood back. We've got to go in there. It's right around the corner. It's standing on the corner. It can't speak English. It doesn't want to speak English. I can't even talk the way these people talk. Why you ain't where you is? Go where? I don't know who these people are. And I blamed the kid until I heard the mother talk. And then I heard the father talk. This is all in the house. Everybody knows it's important to speak English, except these knuckleheads. You can't land a plane with why you ain't where. You can't be a doctor with that kind of crap coming out of your mouth. Why can't you hit the streets? Why can't you clean it out yourself? It's our time now, ladies and gentlemen. It is our time. And I have good news for you. It's not about money. It's about you doing something that ordinarily we do. Get in somebody else's business. It's time for you to not accept this language that these people are speaking, which will take them nowhere. What the hell good is Brown versus the Board of Education if nobody wants it? I mean, this is the future, and all of these people who've lined up and done whatever, they've got to be wondering, what the hell happened? Brown versus the Board of Education. These people who marched and were hit in the face with rocks and punched in the face to get an education, and we got these knuckleheads walking around, don't want to learn English. When you go to the church, look at the stained glass things of Jesus. Look at them. Is Jesus smiling? Not in one picture. So tell your friends, let's try to do something. Let's try and make Jesus smile. Let's start parenting. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, I got some jagoon booms gonna call the radio station tomorrow. Throw the bill card, pick it on the black man. See, this is crazy. This is crazy. I got two judges. Sure enough, reality. Say that they're tired of seeing us. See, there was a time, excuse me, when us meant Joe Louis knocking out somebody. And we went and got into bed. Got up the next morning, we knew when we went to work, nobody was going to mess with us. Us meant Althea Gibson winning, beating everybody in the world. And the next morning, nobody going to mess with us. Graduate of Florida A&M. Make me feel good. Marian Anderson. Our people climbing and doing things that they said we couldn't do. And when we fought, when our grandparents fought to level the playing field, and it was leveled, what did we do with it? We started partying too late. Or too early, I'm sorry. It was just too early. We're partying. We're jumping up and down like we're equal. We're jumping up and down like it's all right. And there's no feeling. Because there's an apathy and a depression. We think we're getting away with something. You heard the judge blew the brains out. And so when the newscaster stands in front of the yellow tape, it's about us. You don't see any politician, after all these murders, after all these robberies, after all these hit an 87-year-old woman in the head that took $30 and ran off crimes, you don't see one politician standing up, name them if you have it, who said, I'm running on a bill of law and order. Why? Because we're killing ourselves. Why? Because we're making fools of ourselves. Why? Because we call up radio stations and say, well, they're putting out dirty laundry. What? talking about. You better clean it up. There are black people who have to walk around this dirty laundry. There are black people who are afraid to talk about it because they're afraid of something violent happening to them. I got a school principal here. There's 1,700, I believe, students going to the school. The man said, I got 20 parents out of 1,700 who are strong people. What about the rest of them? Well, you understand me? And then we've got excuses why they won't come in. Well, some of them feel that they don't speak the proper English. Okay. You were born here. The man from Nigeria comes in 2 months ago without a promise of any check. $45 and an address to go live with AD. And the second day he's here, where does he go? Community college. Pick up a book on engineering. Drive the cab speaking English, a little bit of French and all that. What are our children doing? Practicing a first language that only they understand on the corner. You almost see what I'm saying? That's the only part I've been getting so far. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? I don't see what you're saying. And so I went over to a friend. I said, now look, what did he just say? And his friend said, he said, well, you see what I'm saying. Now let's figure this out. 70 years old. There was a language on the corner. Everybody around 50 years old say whether I'm lying or not. There was a language on the corner. Right or wrong? Right. Talk to me. And when you went home, what'd you do with that language? That's right. But these kids take the language right into the house because the mother is off with the brother. You see what I'm saying? The whole family, everybody see what I'm saying? What I'm saying. If the bridge is out 200 feet ahead and I'm waving my arm and I'm saying the bridge is out, and you're going to stop the car and say, well, I think we need somebody else to tell me that the bridge is out. Because you don't know how to say it. I'm blunt, and I'm going to stay blunt. Why? Because people say it in a nice way, and they think you can. People think they can continue on. You got to answer the same questions that you've always asked yourself. Why would a boy say he doesn't mind going into prison? Because his friends are there. Why would he say that? It's got to be about the house he's in. It's got to be about the apartment. Something's not right. And I said 6 years ago, I don't have my timing off. Our children are trying to tell us something, and we're not listening.
There's conspiracy theorists that will tell you he was taken down simply because of him spreading a against narrative message amongst the Afro-American community. I don't buy it. His actions were his actions and consistent over many years. Even though they can only get him for one within the statute of limitations for the crimes he committed, it was pretty obvious that he absolutely had been doing this for years, to the point of being referenced in the Kavanaugh hearing that has taken precedence this week. And it's not for nothing. But I think that much like Kavanaugh has been run through the ringer and tarnished irreparably just by the accusations of committing a horrendous sexual crime, and I don't think what Kavanaugh was accused of doing reaches anywhere near the level of horror and severity that what Bill Cosby actually got convicted of does. So comparing and contrasting the two is disingenuous as much as it is poignant. I think it's less applicable to Kavanaugh than it is to Dr. Cosby. But again, the work of the man stands aside from their horrific actions, and I think Dr. Cosby needs to be recognized for the body of work he produced. Not only that, the many hundreds of people that he offered career opportunities to that would not have had the career opportunities had he not been such a superstar. And ultimately, the value of his work should historically outweigh the immediate horror of his crimes. He's serving his time, probably less than he deserves for the actions he's undertaken over the years, but he still is accounting for what he has done, and he may not live to see the end of his sentence because he's an 81-year-old man already. But I think we need to be able to separate the man from his work and look back at his work and realize that it is important, it is good, and it holds value despite the end of this man's life. I urge you to take another look at Dr. Cosby's career and work from the 1960s through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Reevaluate his work. Separate it from the man, separate it from his crimes, and hopefully you'll find value in it. Talk soon.